There are people in this world who walk into a room and everything changes. No announcement, no introduction, no explanation needed. The air shifts, conversations quiet, and everyone instinctively looks up without knowing why. These people don't demand attention, they command it without trying, and the most unsettling part is that most of them don't even realize they're doing it. In 2019, researchers at Stanford University conducted a 2-year behavioral study on social dominance that would change everything psychology thought it understood about human influence. Dr. Elena Vesquez led a team that placed 400 strangers in controlled social environments and recorded every single interaction from 12 different camera angles. Body language, vocal patterns, eye contact, spatial positioning, all of it tracked and analyzed with surgical precision. The goal was simple: identify what makes certain people command a room without any effort whatsoever. What they expected to find was confidence, or charisma, which psychology had studied for decades, or social dominance, which had an entire literature built around it. What they actually found was completely different from anything in existing research, and it changed the way scientists understand human power dynamics forever. Roughly 3.2% of the participants consistently changed the behavior of everyone around them without raising their voice, without making demands, without even initiating conversation in most cases. Their mere presence reorganized the social dynamics of the entire room. Other people unconsciously turned their bodies toward these individuals. Conversations near them became more thoughtful, less superficial. Group decisions shifted toward whatever direction these people silently indicated. People felt safer, more grounded, more certain when near them, and none of this was conscious. None of it was requested. It simply happened as naturally as gravity. Psychologists gave this phenomenon a name: silent authority. And it wasn't just one trait or one quality. It was a specific combination of 3 elements that had to exist together to create this effect. Silent authority alone wasn't enough. Moral control alone wasn't enough. Fearless independence alone wasn't enough. But when all 3 existed in one person simultaneously, something almost supernatural happened. People could feel it before they understood it, and once they felt it, they could never ignore it again. This isn't about being an introvert or being shy. This isn't about social anxiety or a quiet personality type. This is about a specific energy that certain human beings carry, an energy so powerful that it reorganizes every room they enter without a single word being spoken. And throughout history, the most powerful leaders, the most respected figures, the people who changed entire industries and entire nations, almost all of them carried this exact same energy. Think about the figures who have dominated stories on this channel. Clint Eastwood sitting in a boardroom with 14 studio executives demanding explanations and giving them nothing but silence, then walking out and proving them all wrong with box office numbers. Lucille Ball hearing a racial slur on her own soundstage and stopping an entire live production to defend a young woman nobody else would protect. Johnny Carson carrying a dead soldier's secret for 21 years and breaking that silence only when a dying man gave him permission. Every single one of these moments was an expression of this exact aura in action: silent authority, moral control, and fearless independence operating together in one human being. But here is what makes this story truly unsettling, and what the Stanford researchers discovered in the final months of their study. The people who carry this aura usually don't know they have it. They don't see themselves as powerful or commanding or influential. They don't walk into rooms thinking about the effect they're having on others. They simply see themselves as someone who refuses to be anything less than what they believe in. Someone who won't explain themselves to people who don't deserve an explanation. Someone who won't compromise their values for approval or comfort or security. Someone who will walk away from anything that conflicts with who they are at their core, without drama, without looking back, without losing a single night of sleep over it. And that refusal, that quiet insistence on being exactly who they are regardless of what anyone else thinks, is what makes the entire room go silent. Not because they demanded silence, but because their presence made everything else feel unnecessary. If this idea of a silent power that commands a room without a single word already has your attention, hit that subscribe button for Emma's Theater right now, because we are about to break down exactly how this energy works, why it works, and whether you already carry it without knowing. We bring you the stories and the science behind the people who change everything just by existing. And drop a comment below telling me, have you ever walked into a room and felt someone's presence before you even saw them? Someone whose energy made everything around them shift without them saying a word? Share that moment. I read every single comment. The reason human beings respond so powerfully to this energy has nothing to do with luck or personality or some mysterious gift that certain people are born with. It is rooted in evolutionary biology, in the way our nervous systems were designed to process information about the people around us, and in a survival instinct that has been operating in human beings for over 200,000 years. For most of that time, humans lived in small groups where survival depended entirely on following the right leader. Not the loudest person in the group, not the most aggressive or the most physically dominant. The one whose internal certainty radiated outward and made others feel safe. That instinct, that ancient ability to detect who carries genuine authority versus who is merely performing it, is still hardwired into every human being alive today. When you walk into a room and feel someone's presence before you see them, before you hear them speak, before you even consciously register that they're there, that is 200,000 years of evolution operating exactly as it was designed to. Your nervous system is scanning the room for the person whose internal state signals safety, trustworthiness, and genuine power, and it finds them before your conscious mind even knows it's looking. Neurologically, what happens when you encounter someone carrying this aura is remarkably specific. The amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for processing threat and safety, immediately calms in their presence. This happens before conscious thought, before judgment, before any decision you make about whether or not to trust this person. Your nervous system has already decided. It has already processed thousands of microsignals, the stillness of their body, the steadiness of their gaze, the absence of nervous energy, the complete lack of need radiating from their presence, and it has concluded that this person is trustworthy. This is why the feeling is so powerful and so difficult to override with rational thought. You can tell yourself that you don't know this person, that you have no reason to trust them, but your body has already made the decision and no amount of conscious reasoning will change it. This is the foundation of silent authority. It operates below the level of thought, in the ancient machinery of human survival, and it cannot be faked. The psychology of why silence specifically creates power is well documented across decades of research. Every study on group dynamics and influence shows the same consistent pattern. The person who speaks least in a group is almost always assumed by others to be the most thoughtful, the most considered, the most worthy of attention when they do finally speak. Silence implies that words are chosen carefully, that nothing needs to be proven or defended or explained, and that the person is internally complete enough to be comfortable without filling every moment with noise. And that implication carries more weight than any argument, any speech, any carefully constructed persuasion ever could. When someone speaks constantly, the room eventually stops listening. When someone speaks rarely, the room leans forward every single time. This is not a theory. This is observable behavior that repeats itself in every social environment studied. There is also what psychologists call the mirror effect, which is one of the most powerful dynamics that silent authority creates. When someone carries this energy into a room, others begin unconsciously mirroring their state. Conversations become quieter and more deliberate. People choose their words more carefully. The entire energy of the space calibrates itself to match the most centered, most internally complete person present. This is why leaders with this aura never need to demand respect or ask for attention. They create both simply by existing in a state of internal completeness. The room adjusts to them, not the other way around, and everyone in that room feels the shift without being able to explain what caused it. Moral control operates through an equally powerful, but different psychological mechanism. Human beings possess what researchers call an authenticity detection system, a remarkably sophisticated ability to sense when someone is being genuine versus when they are performing. We feel it in our bodies before we understand it in our minds. When someone genuinely lives by their principles, consistently, without exception, without compromise, others feel that consistency radiating outward like heat from a fire. It creates a sense of reliability that no amount of charm or charisma can manufacture. And this reliability is what transforms moral control from a personal virtue into a social force. When you encounter someone whose actions perfectly match their values in every observable situation, your nervous system registers that alignment as trustworthy at the deepest possible level. You don't choose to trust them. You simply do, because everything about their presence tells your ancient survival instincts that this is a person who can be relied upon completely. The most powerful way to understand what this aura actually looks like in practice is to examine the people throughout history who carried all three components simultaneously, because their stories don't just illustrate the theory, they reveal exactly how silent authority, moral control, and fearless independence operate when they exist together in one human being. Clint Eastwood is perhaps the most complete example of this aura in modern history, not because of any single moment or any single decision, but because he demonstrated all three components consistently across 6 decades of his career without ever wavering, without ever compromising, and without ever once feeling the need to explain himself to anyone. When Clint sat in that Warner Brothers boardroom in 1985 facing 14 executives who demanded 47 pages of explanations, his silence wasn't nervousness or stubbornness or arrogance. It was the natural expression of someone whose internal certainty was so complete that defending himself to people who didn't understand his work felt genuinely unnecessary. He wasn't choosing to be difficult. He was simply being exactly who he was, and who he was had no room for submission to institutional authority that he didn't respect. His moral control showed itself most clearly on the set of Unforgiven in 1992, when Ray Jessup used a racial slur loud enough for the entire crew to hear. Clint didn't deliberate. He didn't calculate consequences or consult producers or weigh the legal risks of what he was about to do. He moved immediately, physically, with a fury that veterans on that crew had never seen from him before, because his moral compass left absolutely no room for hesitation. In that moment, protecting Morgan Freeman mattered infinitely more than protecting his career, his production schedule, or his carefully maintained image as a controlled and professional director. The moral decision was already made before his conscious mind even registered the situation, because when your internal values are that deeply rooted, they don't wait for permission to act. They simply act, and the consequences become something you deal with afterward, not something you calculate beforehand. And his fearless independence was demonstrated every single time he ripped up a contract, walked out of a meeting, or made a film that every studio executive in Hollywood told him would fail. Every single time, he chose his own internal truth over institutional approval, and every single time the results vindicated him completely. Lucille Ball carried this same combination of forces, but expressed it through a different entry point. Her silent authority wasn't built on refusing to speak. It was built on decades of being the most powerful woman in television, while never making that power loud or obvious. She simply made decisions that were right, consistently and without exception, and let the results speak for themselves. But the moment that revealed the full force of her aura was October 14, 1962, when she heard Howard Chambers use a racial slur against Eleanor Wilson on her own soundstage. Lucy didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, didn't weigh the financial risk of confronting a sponsor whose company spent $2 million a year on her show. She walked directly toward him because her moral compass had already made the decision before her business mind could intervene. She gave him a choice in front of 60 witnesses: apologize to Eleanor or leave, and she meant every word of the threat she made about ensuring every newspaper in the country knew why he'd left. This wasn't performance. This wasn't strategic positioning. This was a woman living in such complete alignment with her values that any other response was literally unthinkable to her. Johnny Carson represents perhaps the purest expression of silent authority in entertainment history because his power was built almost entirely on consistency over time. He carried Dutch Morrison's secret for 21 years without telling a single person, without hinting, without breaking, because he had made a promise and his moral framework simply did not allow him to break it regardless of how inconvenient that silence became. He built his career on being the most trusted figure in American television, and that trust wasn't manufactured through charm or charisma or clever writing. It was earned through decades of being exactly who he said he was, in every situation, without exception. When Dutch's telegram finally released him from his oath, Johnny didn't hesitate for a single second. He rewrote his entire show, risked everything he'd spent 30 years building, and chose honor over entertainment because his internal compass had already made the decision. The room went silent that night not because Johnny demanded silence, but because 30 million Americans were watching two men honor a promise made on a frozen hillside 21 years earlier, and the weight of that consistency, that unwavering moral certainty carried across 2 decades, was almost impossible to look away from. The most important truth about this aura, the one that the Stanford researchers discovered in the final phase of their study and that every historical example confirms beyond any doubt, is that you cannot build it by trying to build it. You cannot manufacture silent authority through practice exercises or meditation techniques or self-improvement routines. You cannot develop moral control by reading books about ethics or attending seminars about leadership. You cannot create fearless independence by forcing yourself to make bold decisions or pushing yourself outside your comfort zone for the sake of growth. All of those approaches fail because they are fundamentally external. They are attempts to create an internal state through external action, and the aura that changes rooms operates entirely from the inside out. However, what you can do, and what every single person who has ever carried this energy has done, is remove the obstacles that are preventing it from emerging naturally. Because this energy already exists inside you. It has always existed inside you. The question is not how to create it, but how to stop suppressing it. The first and most important obstacle is the habit of explaining yourself. Every time you defend a decision to someone who didn't ask for your reasoning, you signal that you need their approval. Every time you justify your choices when questioned, you acknowledge their authority to judge you. Every time you fill a silence with words because the quiet makes you uncomfortable, you reveal that you are not yet internally complete enough to let your presence speak without assistance. Clint Eastwood understood this better than almost anyone in modern history. He never explained himself to studio executives, to critics, to the press, to anyone. Not because he was cold or dismissive, but because he understood that the moment you defend yourself, you have already weakened your position. The people who carry this aura don't argue. They don't debate. They don't try to convince. They simply act in accordance with who they are and let the results become the only conversation that matters. When you stop explaining yourself, something shifts inside you almost immediately. A quiet power emerges that has nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with your relationship with yourself. The second obstacle is the absence of non-negotiables. Moral control cannot radiate outward if it doesn't exist inward first, and it cannot exist inward if you haven't identified the values you'll never compromise under any circumstance. Not for money. Not for approval. Not for comfort or security or the opinions of people whose respect you don't actually need. These non-negotiables are not invented or chosen from a list. They are discovered by looking back at the moments in your life when you felt most completely yourself. The times you made a choice that cost you something but felt absolutely right in your bones. Those moments contain your deepest values, and those values are the foundation everything else is built on. Lucille Ball didn't decide in the moment that she would defend Eleanor Wilson. Her moral framework had already been established over decades of making decisions that aligned with her deepest beliefs about human dignity and fairness. When the moment came, her response was not a choice she made in real time. It was the inevitable expression of who she already was. The third obstacle is the fear of walking away. Fearless independence doesn't mean being reckless or impulsive or careless about consequences. It means making decisions based purely on internal truth rather than external pressure, and the only way to develop that capacity is to practice it, starting small and building over time. The first time you leave a conversation that is draining you without apologizing, something changes in you. The first time you say no to a social obligation that conflicts with your values without guilt or excuse, something strengthens. The first time you walk away from an opportunity that everyone else would kill for because it doesn't align with who you are, something fundamental shifts in your relationship with yourself. Johnny Carson didn't wake up one morning with the ability to carry a 21-year secret without breaking. That capacity was built through years of small, consistent choices to honor his commitments even when honoring them was difficult, even when no one would have known if he hadn't. The final and perhaps most critical obstacle is the addiction to external validation. We live in an era that has made seeking approval the default mode of human interaction. Every decision shaped by what others will think, every choice made to fit expectations rather than internal truth, every moment spent performing for an audience rather than simply being, all of it destroys this aura before it can take root. The moment you stop caring how others perceive you and start caring only about living in alignment with who you actually are, the energy begins to build itself. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, consistently. Exactly the way it has always built itself in every person throughout history who ever made an entire room go silent simply by walking into it.